All right, let's just start with a kind of wild question. We're all here because we love the world's most popular role-playing game, right? But what happens if you take out its most famous part? What happens if you run dungeons without any dragons? I mean, come on, it's literally half the name of the game. It's right there in the logo. That iconic ampersand is a dragon-breathing fire. Dragons are just woven into the DNA of D&D. They're the ultimate challenge, they have the best loot, they are the monster that defines the whole idea of high fantasy. And welcome to The Dungeon Master's Apprentice. This channel is about RPG design, consequences, and why games actually work at the table. So, what if they weren't? What if you, as the world builder, just took them out of the equation? What if you created a world where dragons are just myths? Does that break everything? Or maybe does it unlock something way more interesting? Well, this exact question started this absolutely fascinating debate online. It all kicked off with a dungeon master who was building a new world and had this one simple, radical idea. What if, in my world, dragons were extinct? And let me tell you, that one idea completely split the community right down the middle. And really, it boils down to these two completely opposite takes. Is a world without dragons a richer world, full of mystery and ancient history? Or is it just an emptier one that's missing a key ingredient for high adventure?
So this was the argument from the person who started the whole discussion. And it's a brilliant point, right? He's basically saying that if you see dragons all the time, they stop being special. They just become another monster to fight. But by making them extinct, you turn them back into true legends. Their absence is felt everywhere, and that can be way more powerful than their presence ever was.
And then, of course, there's the other side of the coin. For a lot of players, the dream, the possibility of one day facing a dragon is a huge part of the fun. Taking that off the table completely, well, it just feels like a major downgrade, like you're taking away the Super Bowl of D&D.
But here's the thing. This isn't just a theory. As tons of people pointed out, some of the most famous fantasy settings are already built on this exact idea. In Dark Sun, there's only one dragon, and it's terrifying. In Eberron, they're ancient and mysterious. Even in the Elder Scrolls, before Skyrim happens, dragons are just things you see in old carvings. So we have proof. This idea can absolutely work.
Okay, so if we decide to go for it, what does a world without dragons actually look like? Because it's not just about what you subtract. It's about the giant, dragon-shaped hole you've just created and what's going to come rushing in to fill it. And you have to understand, that void is massive. Dragons aren't just big lizards with wings. They're forces of nature. They carve out mountains, they hoard ancient magic, they sit at the absolute tippy top of the food chain. When they vanish, you better believe the entire world is going to feel the aftershocks.
So here's the cool part. Extinct doesn't mean gone. Their legacy is everywhere, in ancient ruins, in lost magic. Their descendants are still walking around. The Dragonborn, the kobolds, they are living reminders of what the world lost. Their artifacts, all those legendary hoards, massive dragon skulls, maybe even a fossilized egg, become the ultimate treasures. And you just know there are going to be cults trying to bring them back.
What all of this does is create incredible narrative tension. By constantly reminding the players that dragons aren't there, you make them totally obsessed with them. It's a classic storytelling tool called Chekhov's gun. If you show a gun on the mantle in Act 1, it has to go off by Act 3. Well, by showing a world full of dragon bones, you're making your players wait on the edge of their seats, wondering if and when a real one will finally appear.
Now, this idea goes even deeper than just the story. Getting rid of an entire species this powerful would have real, measurable consequences for the world itself. We're talking less about mythology here and more about, well, biology.
This quote from a classic D&D book just says it all. Ecosystems are a delicate dance, even magical ones. Everything is connected. And when you pull out the ultimate keystone species, which dragons definitely are, that whole delicate balance is going to shatter. So you have to start asking questions. What were the dragons hunting? Giants, rocks, other massive beasts? Without their main predator, do the giant populations suddenly explode and start rampaging across the countryside? Does some other, lesser predator get a chance to rise up and take their place at the top? Because, as they say, nature abhors a vacuum. That empty job slot for terrifying aerial apex predator isn't gonna stay empty for long. Maybe you see massive swarms of griffins become a new plague. Or maybe something even weirder, like the owlbear, gets to expand into new territory. The world has to adapt, and that adaptation creates all new kinds of monsters and adventures for your players. And this really gets to the core of this whole idea. Maybe the most powerful tool you have when building a world isn't deciding what to add, but deciding very carefully what to take away.
We talked about this before, but it's so important it's worth saying again. The whole point of Chekhov's gun is that every detail should matter. But by making dragons extinct, you've made their absence matter. You've hung a giant dragon-shaped hole on the wall, and now the whole story is going to be about if that hole ever gets filled.
Honestly, one person in that thread summed up the entire genre with this absolutely perfect and hilarious quote. And it's so true, right? Pretty much every high fantasy story is either 1, a sad story about how amazing things used to be when dragons existed, or 2, a very panicked story about how to survive the dragons that just showed up.
And that's really the final takeaway. The idea of a dragon, their legacy, their impact, the sheer weight of their absence, can be a much more powerful engine for a story than just another monster with a stat block. It can fuel a whole campaign and make the moment of their potential return a truly world-shaking event.
If you want more personal thoughts on RPG design and consequences, especially the ideas that don't always fit into a video, I write a short newsletter between uploads. There's a link in the description if you want that.
So I'll leave you with this question. It doesn't have to be dragons. Maybe you take away the gods. Maybe you take away all magic. Maybe you build a world without a sun. What foundational piece of reality can you remove from your world to make it more mysterious, more dangerous, and ultimately more interesting? What void will you create?
And until next time, adventure on.